Hi guys, my name is Andrew. I'm with the UPT Rigging Loft. I've been working there for about 4 years or so. I wanted to come here to share some packing techniques, tips, and tricks for the Sigma 2 Reserve in the Micro Sigma container. We'll be packing the SR340 into this one currently. Are y'all familiar with the new Reserve? Has anybody packed the newer one yet? Okay, cool. So yeah, key differences are the cascaded Vectran lines, a slider with a hole in it, different from before. We now have the somewhat cascaded tail. You'll have noticed the D-line attachment points don't line up as well, so I'm going to show you ways to deal with that. It has been somewhat staged to this point, where I didn't have quite enough time to run through a full pack job to the extent that I wanted to. So far I have flaked and reduced one side. That side is wrapped, the tail is wrapped and clamped. But we'll start from the flaking, the reduction, S-folds all the way, see if we can get through the rest of the pack job from this point. When packing this Reserve, we'll just get right to it. I'm going to unroll the nose to show you from the start. I do a somewhat different pack job from what some of y'all are used to seeing. I actually will lay the canopy out flat as if about to flat pack it. I'll pull tension in line at the top skin with and place a clamp along the A, B, C, and D lines. By doing so, it kind of holds the canopy together up here. From the ProPack method, what you're used to seeing at this point, when you come up to here, you'll get inside the flake. You'll likely trap it to the center while you're flaking to the outside. By having these small clamps there, it just better sets me up for a cleaner finished product. Once I have the canopy flaked, ProPacked, laid down, I clean up the flakes from here. I typically will do flake, flake, reduce, reduce, but this will just be an example of what I do when it comes to flaking. I'll flip all the way back to that A to B layer. Reaching inside the canopy, I'll find and collect the 5 B lines that should be right here. I grab them from the outside and trap them to the floor, flaking that fabric to the outside. It is acceptable to stop here, though I like to go one step deeper. I'll then flip inside the canopy to where I can then see the B attachment points. And if I trap them from the outside and follow my left hand on the inside, I can clean that seam up to that span-wise apex that runs between the B attachment points. I'll trap it from the outside now, and at this point I can place a weight. This really cleans up that center line, giving you a very clear separation between the fabric and lines. In this upper section, I'll just place a weight because I can't reach much higher than about here, as that is the bottom skin of the canopy. Moving to the BC layer, flip it down just the same. Reaching inside, collect my 5 Cs, flake that fabric to the outside. By having that weight in line, it allows me to somewhat pull against it, really showing that that central channel is there. Can flake all the way to the outside, place the C's to the center, come to the outside and clean that flake up. Just before placing a weight in this section, I have a chance to quarter this section of the slider. Using the paddle, because it already is somewhat in its spot, I'll use the paddle to just clean it up to bring it to that outer edge. Laying it down and trapping it. I'll then migrate my weight up from the bottom to it. Same concept now in this upper section. I'll collect my 5 D lines to get them out of the way. And I do want to clean up this area a bit. So I'll come from the outside, aim at the C lines, direct that span-wise seam up until its apex, trap it from the outside, flip back to it, and then bring a weight up a layer. The C to D flake is done similarly. Collect the D lines, flake between, pushing that fabric kind of high and to the outside as that's where it needs to go anyway. Trapping the D lines in place, I can then work to the stabilizer. At this point, they are somewhat on top of each other, not exactly clean. This is a step that I will go back to during my reduction. So while they are near where I want them to be, they're not yet how I would like to leave them. So I'll pause here, Bringing that stabilizer up, you can reduce it any way you see fit. For this step, I do a single fold to the center. Bringing that weight up a layer now. Placing this one perpendicular tends to hold this section in place, and there's nothing in the center now that I need to protect. As I'm working through it, I'll rough flake the tail, knowing that I will take more time during the actual reduction. I don't want to spend too much time dressing this up at this point, but as I go, I'm just directing that seam to the center, fabric to the outside. With the cascaded tail of the SR, I typically will do this portion of the flake stacked all on top of each other. As you see on this side, it does slide its way up as it goes, so there will be a couple attachment points that stack on top of each other, then a short section of unloaded fabric here, and then the rest of the tail will stack in line a bit higher on the canopy. Working my way to the center. Cool. When I've reached the center of the tail, at the tail label, this is typically where I would have flaked both sides, and then I would go back and reduce the first side. Now we'll reduce the second side. This likely looks a bit more rough than you would see it at this point in your own pack job, but it will all come together when I finish the reduction. So at this point I would pull the weights. I'll gently flip back to my A to B flake. We can begin the reduction. So classic mentality for reduction folds would be to do a singular fold to the center, whatever the width of the canopy, find a way to get it in the bag. We've all packed in that method at some point. To me, we can be a bit more specific with how we size the reduction folds to place them in the bag. We can do somewhat of a cheat fold. The packing manual for these canopies does say to reduce the canopy. It doesn't have any language on exactly how to do so. This is where that gray area comes in on being able to choose how you do a certain step to achieve the functionality that we're going for. We will input a small cheat fold into that first reduction to more appropriately size what the finished reduction will be. So with that fold in place, now when I do the actual reduction fold to the center, you'll see that we can be more specific about how we size this to the bag. Using my Velcro line as a reference point, that is about the working width of the bag that I have. If ever you question it, you can then compare it to the reserve container itself along those bottom corners of the reserve tray. You'll see that some bags do extend a bit further than the limits of the container itself, and you can account for that when you size your reduction folds. What I've found for the SR is that reducing it exactly to the width allows you to achieve a better shape, and especially with this bag, we want to put the shape of the canopy into the container that we want to see, as opposed to letting the container or the free bag dictate the shape that it will end up. Has anybody used this type of reduction fold by doing a small cheat fold beforehand? Okay, so you'll see that it can be very helpful on across all containers that I've encountered. It really, on those super small sizes, so say like an OP126 and a V306, you can be very specific about how you size it, and it will, the finished product really does come out better. It gets nice, clean, flat sidewalls. You don't have the bulging on the sides where then you have trouble getting the risers to lay flat. This isn't intended to completely change how you pack, but it is just tips and tricks of what does work, and feel free to implement as much or as little as you choose. With that reduction fold in place, I'll then roll the nose. This is not changed on the SR. As it was on the VR, we'll count out the 5 cells. 2, 4, missing 1. 4 cells. We've got our center cell there. And we will roll them into the center. So I do about 1.5 to 2 inch rolls, working towards the center cell. That's 4 rolls there. 5 will just hide it behind that reduction, and then I can see just the corner of the nose of my center cell hanging out. Bringing down the B to C layer, we can begin that reduction as well. I have one more chance to quarter this section of the slider. I'll input my small cheat fold, mirroring that of the A to B reduction, and then fold that in towards the center. For the C to D flake, we'll do the same. I prefer on my reductions to all go one direction, so it's up, up, up for these. In my mind, it is the path of least resistance here for this to naturally fold in. If we do fold it down, we're disturbing more of the fabric up here. Functionally, this has not proven to make any difference in the opening. When testing reserve parachutes, they test it in absolutely all configurations and are basically testing for least common denominator. So there are truly times where they'll shove it hand over hand into a free bag to see that it does open just about the same. Though we like to take time and care with our reserve pack jobs because it is your customers' and jumper's life at the end of the day, if not your own. So at this point, I'll pull tension on the stabilizer. I'll input a small S fold, trapping that then in place. And using my 2 large clamps at this point, I'll place a clamp here that captures the corner of that stabilizer and the nose. Bring my weights into play. All right. With the tail, we'll start by bringing that central seam back to the center there. So I just, again, work my way to that tail label. I'll actually do my flaking from the inside of the canopy, which may differ from your approach thus far. It can be done from the outside just the same as I'm doing here. But by working from the inside, I can be more intentional about where the seams are placed and ensure that the line stays central. So here I'll work my way up to the D attachment points. Pulling tension on them, I can then find my first break line here. And if I work that seam up, I can pull tension on the Ds, simultaneously pull tension on that first break line, place it in the center, and then create this small loop between. Between the D attachment point and the seam at the tail, we can create this small loop of fabric. Sunpath refers to this section as the E fold of the pack job. Kenneth Gaida, my predecessor, referred to this as the flugel fold, and it just does end up looking like small wings that lay on either side, but you can think of this as an E flake, essentially. With that in place, I'll then move to the next layer. Flake between, pull tension on the seam, place it in the center, create that little loop. This third seam is one that does not have an attachment point on it, but it will stay in line down here with the lower portion of the tail. Cool. With that loop now created, we are through all the ones that will stack on this lower portion. It is permissible to then stack the rest of the tail here in line with it. Once you have a clean stack, you can actually slide everything up to then gain tension. I prefer to intentionally place each section of the tail. So I'll come up about halfway through where this loaded break line is and this one will be to place that next seam. Trapping it with my forearm, I then can create this loop up top. before getting too far, I can move this weight up to somewhat protect the work that I've done there and let me focus on this section a little better. All right, half cell away from the tail label, I can stop here. I'll bring the weight up to protect that. It is a little less satisfying than it is packing other reserves in this section, just because you can't really get it to lay perfectly flat like you're used to seeing. Though to maintain tension on the D-lines, having this somewhat zigzag in there is necessary. Right. To bring the tail in line with the reduction, I'm only focusing on this foot long or so section. I'll use both paddles. Clamping it just in line with the outside of my reduction, I can then lift up and flip under. Place a clamp there to hold your work. Then I can shift to focus on this upper section. I'll smooth the seams in line with that central channel, working my way through the layers. When I get to this point, having this nice central line, I know what I'm aiming for, so I can trap that to the center, and then flip this under to match. This fluffier upper section may be concerning. It may be kind of a point that you try and work on over time, but I feel that as long as the seams are aimed to the center, fabric to the outside, that is the goal of our pack job anyway. So it will be a little fluffier, but it's okay. Now the loops that I've created in between, this is the point I'll address them. I peek back into the pack job here to see them all sitting there. If you thumb through until you reach that first D line, you can find a section between where you can get them all under tension. I'll actually lift them up and fold them back towards the outside as if it were another flake. Declaring that central line, folding them back towards my hand, and then cleaning that seam up in the center like we did for the other flakes. Fit back to that point, then all of my tail seams can stack right next to the D-lines there. It is harder to see in there, but they are now all under tension, D's centrally placed, and then it deals with that bulk of fabric that you sometimes encounter right here. It just feels like fluff that you don't have any real intention for until you fold it to the outside. You'll see that it can become a bit more manageable. I'll place this weight on top. And now I'll wrap the tail. Work out about a half cell. I wrap my tail between the A to B and B to C flakes. Placing a clamp there to protect it. Moving up, I can smooth it with my forearm to get to a point where I now can work with both hands. I'll remove that clamp, work out a bit more of the cell, smooth it in between that A to B, B to C. Place a clamp to protect that. It would be at this point that I would mark the tail label. This one does not have one, so I won't do that on this one. And obviously, having not done the pack job start to finish here, this won't be a live pack job, though functionally it could be. gone ahead and prepared the free bag. So I'll tie a overhand knot in with the soft bodkin, about a fist's width or so. I typically size it exactly the depth that I would like for it to be. Starting wide is easy for you to get the canopy in, but then your shape is a bit different from what your finished product's going to be. So I try and aim for what I imagine the thickness will be of this when it's packed. As we place the canopy into the free bag, we're trying to achieve a certain shape with micro sigmas and sigmas specifically, but also the vector 3 as well. We have an aggressive tapered shape that occurs when properly shaped for the container. It'll have 3 different densities as well. In this section, we'll feel it to be quite hard. We'll have a medium density, and the ears we want quite soft. We do want bulk and material in there, but we just want it soft to allow for the riser covers to close properly, and so it doesn't feel like somebody's digging into your shoulders of the instructor or the jumper that is using this equipment. To achieve that, we will size our S-folds accordingly. All right, within this section, between where the loop passes through and the Velcro line of the free bag, the bulk of our S-folds will sit. If you think for a minute with me how the S-folds are laying out, we have about 5 lengths of fabric in this section. If we start here where the grommets would be, we have the first length, second, third, comes up for the 4th, 5th. Everything remaining would then become our ears. If we think about this being 5 lengths of this section, we can appropriately size our S-folds so we don't have too much bulk in the ears. I measure that from the free bag by going between the grommet and the Velcro line. I'll slip back an inch or so, accounting for the thickness here when I do bring that fold up. If I count out my S-folds now, by placing the paddle right here at the grommets, that would put the grommets right at the mouth. If I want them inset a bit, I can actually slip back about an inch, counting from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now that looks like too much ear for this pack job. So if I shift up to what I believe would be an appropriate amount of ear, I can then count backwards from here. 5, 4, 3. The paddle seems to fall right here, meaning all of this will become part of the S-fold. This is where we incorporate somewhat of a cheat fold as well into the S-folds, which allows the S-fold section to stack up higher, achieving more density there, but reducing the amount that we have to shove into the ears. I'll check just to ensure that we're about the width we're looking for. Yes, so I'm slightly wider, which would be preferred. Narrower would cause issues down the line of actually filling out the corners of the reserve. So as wide or slightly wider as the Velcro line is what you're trying to aim for. With my paddle in place here, I can then remove the weight. I'll scoop under the lines, picking them up in one hand. And I will slide the canopy towards the container, keeping everything under tension. This gives me a moment to address the nose of my slider. I can open it up just slightly to mirror that is on the top and dress up my A-lines if they have crept out of place. With that under tension, I'll place the paddle in about the middle and allow the canopy to relax back on itself. Right. Move these 2 lower clamps. The upper paddle has done its job at this point, so I can slip it out and now place it back on top. So if I place the paddle right at the edge of the S-fold and fold back, the width of this fold is so long that it would push into our closing loop. And if you've seen the silicone that's on the center cell sometimes from the canopy being pressed up against that closing loop, we can kind of adjust for that. If we slip our paddle back a little bit and incorporate some of this S-fold back into the fold when we bring the rest of the canopy up, it will shorten up this distance here stacking it taller and pulling it slightly away from the loop. With my paddle in place there, I can scoop under the whole canopy, fold it back on itself. My right hand stays in place and pushes towards the apex of the canopy while my left hand pushes towards the container. My right hand's now slipping down to the grommets to ensure that they stay inside the pack job, really tightening up that S-fold. I'll place a knee on top and work that center cell just over the rolled cells that are on the side of it. And bring my bag around. Do the same for this side of the center cell. That lower paddle has done its job. It'll now move back to the top. I'll now place this paddle just slightly overhanging that bottom S-fold. This allows me to create some space for the AAD and fill out the lower corners of the reserve tray. With that in place, I'll scoop under the canopy, trying to be clear of the lines. Fold that all back towards the apex. Coming around, I'll gently place my knees on top of the canopy. The slider grommets did somewhat creep out, so I'm going to work them in before continuing. I'll pull those upper two clamps, and then using the paddles against themselves, I can kind of leverage them together to tighten up those S-folds a bit. This is now where I'll remove the small clamps that I've used through the pack job. 3, 2, and 1 are now out. I've accounted for all my clamps, and I know I have just 2 paddles remaining within this pack job. I can allow the canopy to relax down now and separate the ears. With my hands on my knees, I'll start collecting the center cell. Following all the way up that central seam till I reach as far as I can go. This I will somewhat separate to either side. If you collect it centrally, it creates a bit more bulk in the center where the seat of the pilot chute will be. So I like to work it right and left. Cool. With that now reduced, I can protect it with the heel of my hand, and I have both hands to work with to reduce the ears. The classic method for reducing the ears at this point would be a singular fold back towards the bulk of the canopy, which totally works, but the bulk distribution doesn't play as nicely with vectors as it would something like a sunpath pack job, where more bulk in that higher section of the ear would be preferred. We can do what is called or what we refer to as yet another little cheat fold into it. I'll take my tail stack and C to D layer, flip them both to the inside for a moment. My nose, A to B, and B to C will all get their own fold. I will do a small S fold here, bringing that to the central bulk of the canopy here. Collecting it to the center, I can feel the density being created between my hands. And then all I have left is that tail stack and C to D fold up here that I can reduce into a nice soft ear. Bringing the bag around, I'll work it up as high as I can into the bag before letting go. Smack those paddles flush. One big hand grip on the S-fold, and then I can slip the bag just around it. I try not to go too deep with the bag here, as then I'll hinder myself from getting this other ear in. So once that's in, I'll then kneel back on it. Tail stack, C to D flake, flip to the inside. Nose, A to B, B to C. Little backhand grip, and turn it down, basically creating a small S-fold within that. tail stack and seated default, I can make a soft ear around. Pull it all out of the bag. All right. Mm-hmm. So with it mostly contained, I can then get back to the other side. I'm trying to keep the corners here somewhat sharp to fill out the corners of the reserve tray. A little dressing's necessary. Obviously those grommets got away from me a bit, so I'll go just inside where that S-fold is, paddle them somewhat in place. To work it deeper into the bag, I really don't want to push from this section as I'm going to start stealing some of my bulk from these lower corners. I can use that bottom layer to push it deeper, and that top layer will follow. At this point, I'm unrolling the bag now to open up the mouth of it. So as you see, this bag looks much larger than what we're used to with that the bag that was on the VR360. We really don't have all of this working space. It is just between the safety stow line and the top edge here, as it is with the bottom Velcro line and the top edge. So I'm trying to get the bulk of the canopy back past this line. Do you have a preferred side that you start with your stows? Okay, you do have a preferred. So I typically start with the left side and then the right, rigger's left, rigger's right, being that that last stow exiting here as it travels towards the line stow pocket. If it comes from this side, it is less likely to be near the potential AAD pocket Velcro that would be sitting right here. If you don't have a preferred, maybe that's some food for thought as to why. Either way, of course, is functional, but this is just how I approach it. I'll work the safety stow out and then begin closing this bag. So it starts with this upper grommet here. We will actually rotate it back towards the safety stow. So if we think of the rounded edges both coming towards the safety stow, that is the proper way to close it. It can be confusing on first encounter, but we do have a packing addendum for this bag that will explain how to properly close it.
If you were to do it the other way, would it?
I don't know, you know. I don't believe that, well, I have not personally seen it tested that way, so I can't comment as to what would happen, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that way, I just wondered.
For sure, yeah. All right, with that in place, not disturbing too much, I'll try and milk some of the slack out of the cascaded section. With it in hand, I'll hand it to myself and bring the stow around. about 4 fingers is appropriate here. I've got narrower fingers, that must be about 3.5 inches or so. That's definitely painful to do with the continuous lines, the Dacron lines on the VR, but it is possible with this same safety stow. As you'll see, the sidewalls are already a bit more square. Using that cheat fold in the reduction fold allows this to be really, really sharp. It doesn't take much dressing to get it to the shape you want. Ideally, my corners here would have been a bit more sharp to better fill out the container, but we'll see how it goes as we're closing. Would you mind pulling the weights off of that board there? Thank you. So I'll sit on the bridle to keep the bag from running away from me. And open up my line stow pouch. The line stow pouch does differ from the bag that was previously on the VR. It now has protected Velcro with these pile flaps that tuck down into it. So the Velcro protector isn't necessarily needed, but it is a good idea if you, if you don't want to have to be so meticulous with placing these. I can pause and create some space in this line stow pouch, if even loosening up the soft bodkin to give you a little more room to work with. We have access to the ear section of this, so some of the line stows can go past this line down into the ears if you need to adjust density there, and it really does create more space to get the bulk of these lines stowed away. I'll pick up that first bite. This one's always difficult to get going. I like to direct this one first to the center of the bag and then over to the side. I'm using the back side of my knuckles to push into it. I really don't want to push my fingers through the lines because then they'll flip over each other and interact weirdly. I'll pick up that next bite. And allow the lines to find how they want to sit. This looks messy, it's because it is. This Oxford cloth of this bag really lets you work the lines down a little better without fear of scraping it with your nails. You can shape your line bites a little bit better. A paddle is also helpful at this point. If you turn it flat, you're able to work the bulk of the lines down. These packing boards are very helpful, allowing you to drag the container towards you without really dragging it much on the webbing. It supports the main lift web and the riser ends. Now, I would typically have a rubber band on it, but funny enough, I don't have one on me here. Pull it right off. Thank you. All right, I basically work it all the way till the length, knowing that I can pull out some excess if I need once I get it into the container. Much easier than putting it back in once we're that far along. Flip open the pocket and place the pile Velcro inside, mating it up completely. Yeah, if time allows, I would back this back out, reset the lines. Don't be afraid to re-stow the lines. At that point, your locking stows are already in place, and the cleaner you can make this, the happier you and your tandem instructor would be, as well as their student. When I do that, though, I would stretch it all the way out. I'll run a paddle between the front and rear riser, and then through the rear riser and steering lines, and then drag those paddles up towards the container. Just to separate the line groups and to limit the crossover interaction between them. But it is perfectly acceptable to do so. As you see, some of these line bites have made it into that ear section, which just adds to the bulk of the whole pack job. So when you plan out your densities, you can account for some of that bulk making it up to there. I'll kneel on the canopy while I create a little space for the AAD. You can dress up the sides a little bit when you do this. Just really helping it to have that nice wedge shape. It's good practice to measure the previous loop that was in there, just to see what the last person was working with. So this one was at about 5 5/8, which I would believe would be too long for this configuration. With the SR340 and the Micro Sigma, I found that 5 inches to 5 1/8 inches is appropriate, depending on the environment, obviously, in which you pack. If it's super humid, you might be closer to that 5 or even 4 7/8. More humid, 5 1/8, 5 1/4 might be your upper limit there. This one is right at 5 inches. We'll see how that goes. I'll prepare the container by flipping everything open. Relaxing the main lift web will also help you get the reserve container a bit flatter on the ground. The lower corners of the reserve tray, I'll actually flip all the way open. Helps me to get the bag in there, and then I'll close them around it as I'm closing the container. I use a latch hook tool to pull my loops through. Obviously reaching through the back pad is just as easy, but I prefer to do that. It just makes my life easier. Grab a pull-up cord. You can use Cypress loop for this. I prefer the 525 Spectra. It tends to last a lot longer through the pack jobs, and as long as you're gentle on the loop, it won't damage things over time. We don't typically use the staging loop. So in the UPT loft, we don't require the use of it. If you prefer to use it, obviously feel free. As long as rigged properly, it is just fine.
It's not mandatory to.
It is not mandatory to use it. Within the manual, you'll see that it is listed as an optional thing. And it makes sense for tandems and very large student rigs.
Yeah,
but
I was under the impression that it was mandatory for students on tandems.
I don't believe so under our, as far as we reach. If your Federation or British Skydiving requires that, that could be a different topic of conversation, but I'm not positive. So, but as far as we stand, it is not mandatory. I'll take a moment to align the risers, and then I place a clamp on it to keep them from creeping away. I'll flip the yoke out and relax it against the ground. Separate the risers so the rears are to the outside, fronts to the inside. I like to fan them out. Really takes away that pressure in the instructor's back, especially when using the L bars. This is an important step. If they're stacked up, you'll likely hear about it from the instructor later that day. Cool, with them fanned out, I can release the soft bodkin, pull my pull-up cord through, bring that on through, and let the bag relax down onto the risers. Grab my closing tools. All right. So when working the bag into the container, this is a step that I try and take a lot of time on. Working it as deep as you can at this point will make the rest of the closing easier. I'll somewhat protect that upper corner and aim that lower corner down into the reserve tray, working back and forth. If you do it all at once, I just prefer to take my time to work back and forth to get it as deep as I can. With it in there, I'll then push my knees on the ears. And then bring that number one flap up and over. Ensure that your pull-up cord is threaded through the cutter and the grommet. I do them simultaneously, so there's never to forget. If you smear your thumb along this Type 3 tape, it helps you to work some of the bag back under this number one flap, as it does try and get pulled on top of the grommet where the AAD cutter sits. So back and forth working the bulk away. When I've now aligned the cutter over the grommet, I'll then kneel close to it. Try and work some loop up. This one is arguably the most difficult flap to start. At this point, it should be quite tight to get that loop through. The rest of the flaps will close a bit more easily once that one's in place. Again, taking time to really fill out the bottom of the reserve tray and working that AAD into the space we've created. Okay. For the bridle folds, we'll do V folds back and forth. I believe the manual shows pictures of it going back and forth in a V. It is permissible to do it one side and then the other, so I prefer to do 2 folds on this side. Them in place, I can protect it and then sweep it under that number 1 flap. Bit close on the sky hook there, so I want to back up and ensure that they are properly sized. I'll now bring that number 2 flap down onto the free bag. I'll protect the bridle folds with the back of my hand or a paddle at this point. Somewhat sweeping the ears down and away, just so they don't get rolled back into the pack job. The number 2 down, I can then work out just enough bridle to allow me to stow the green section of the sky hook. With that tab in place, I'll bring the bridle across. Ensure the red lanyard is stowed all the way into the pocket, and then bring it over just enough to hook onto the sky hook. I prefer to have it under slight tension here. I don't want too much excess so the sky hook can float all over. This gives you a bit more of the red lanyard out past connecting to the RSL and universal lanyard, which if it is pulled too short, there's the chance of disturbing it over time when the jumper is checking their gear or stowing risers, or it's best to just have it preset for success. See how deep I have to dig for this. Cool. Taking 4 3/4 pound seal thread, we'll tie the sky hook. Up from the bottom tends to make life easier here. And we'll tie a surgeon's knot with a single overhand to lock it off. So that's 2 throws one way, 1 throw the other, and then a single overhand. Cool. Trim the tails about 10 millimeters or so. Ensuring all of that is properly stowed, so green in its pocket, red in its pocket. On the skyhook and tied, we'll close the 2A flap. Straighten out the bridle and direct it back towards the number 1 flap. So it folds on itself at about a 90-degree angle there, comes back towards the flap, and folds across. I try and use much of the width of the number 1 flap, or as much of the flap as I can, to really help distribute that bulk so it doesn't really stack up high in the center and then cause issues when we're trying to place our pilot chute. S folds back and forth, and if you want to get fancy, you can reduce each one by 1/8 of an inch as you go. When I get to the doubled over, tripled over section there, I'll ensure that it doesn't have a fold in it because that's bulk that I can't manage. With it placed now in the center, I can align my pilot chute. The swedge on the bottom of the, on the lower ring of the pilot chute, I prefer to have at the 6 o'clock position. It is a bit easier to hide it under this number 3 flap. It doesn't stand out as it would if it were under the 5 or 4. So either 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock, wherever you see fit. Protect the bridle fold with my knee. Use a gun rod or skinny arms to thread through the pilot chute. And we'll center that over the grommet. Cool.
Sorry, mate.
As I use this positive leverage device, I'm really only taking up the slack that I can gain from compressing the pilot chute. I don't want to use this as a crank just to get more loop out. This helps to not bend that floor plate over time or pin it with a pull force that would be too high for that jumper. So it's really only a placeholder to keep the effort off of my hands. Get on top of it with your knees and work it down a bit deeper. And we'll reduce the pilot chute fabric. So I've gone through many iterations of how I reduce this. Our manual says to do accordion folds, which, as I'm sure y'all know, is quite unwieldy at times to try and keep it all together. Something that I've kind of come to recently is a modified accordion fold, that instead of working from the number 3 flap and around, I'll go from the top down. Taking this in hand, laying laying it out flat here. I'll do this about 2 to 3 inch fold, back and forth. When I reach this portion, singular fold there, and then just tuck it under. So not essentially a roll. A roll could potentially hinder the spring action of the pilot chute. So still achieves the accordion fold in a bit more conscious manner to keep that bulk manageable and not just chaotic. I'll then move to the side and do the same. This corner section would be a bit more bulky because it's already the reduction here and the reduction there. If I sweep that under and towards the midsection here, where we sometimes see a divot or a gap, that's a nice place for it. And I'll do the same for under that number 5 flap. This one ends up being a little more messy down here, but we do have this number 3 flap to cover this section. And there are times when the bulk is lacking under this flap and you'll see a divot, so having a bit of pilot chute material there is not a problem. With it about 1 inch from the cap all the way around, and protect it, and then bring the number 3 down. Ensuring the pilot chute material doesn't roll on top of the cap, I'll sweep it away, bring number 3 on top. I will use my tool at this point to transfer that pin up top. I let it overhang a bit here so I can lever it off to the side and put pressure away from the grommet itself so as not to pinch the pin between the 2 grommets. When I do, I also put my toe right next to the grommet I'm trying to extract, and then the pin comes out easily without scratching. And there, we'll move to the number 4. So I pull gentle tension on the number 4 flap, starting to close this corner. Just before I pull full tension, I'm actually going to close this corner around the corner of the reserve, better filling out this section. At the same time, I'm squeezing up on the sidewall to give it a little more shape and to help work that flap closer so we have grommet to grommet before trying to transfer the pin. While not a complete solution to it, if you've noticed some of the containers that develop wrinkles in this area, closing that corner around the reserve as opposed to working it in with it already closed can help alleviate some of the tension that's created on this binding tape that influences the wrinkles in that section. To number 5. with 5-pinned, I can then pull the clamps off of my risers here. And I take a moment to dress the sidewalls of the container just before closing the number 6. So I'll roll it onto its side and put a knee into it. You can use a paddle. You can hit it with the back of your hand, just shaping up those sidewalls a bit. The number 6 should lay nice and flat. It really shouldn't have a curve in this section. If it does, you likely have too much bulk in the ears. This goes for sport and Sigmos. So it should be one of the easiest flaps to close at this point. I'll stage my universal lanyard just by placing the Velcro on the corner. This allows picking it up easier, makes picking it up easier when I go to pin it. At this point, all clamps are out of the pack job. Same concept here, lever up and away. Pin. Rotate the pin off to the side, and using your temp pen to scoop up that tight 3, you can more easily get it under. If you have trouble getting your pull-up cord out, you can stand it up, shift the number 6 down to get it to the middle of the grommet. And the pull-up cord should more easily come out. Sweet. So at that point you would seal and log your pack job. All would be good there. Cool.
Any chance we could, about 5 minutes? I was coming in about 5 minutes time, so yeah.
Yeah, no worries. All good. Just fine. Great. Do you all have any questions? Anything you see stand out or differ wildly from what y'all do?
Why is that reserve not got a data sheet on it?
This one was one used for testing. This was, yeah, one of the prototypes at the time, and just one we had in our on-the-road demo rig. Yeah.